Before we begin, drop a comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Nairobi, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back. Tell me where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. The cold night air bit at Aaron Wells as he shuffled down the deserted street. His boots, once polished, once part of the uniform he wore with pride, now barely resembled the sturdy footwear of a soldier. The heel of one was worn thin, the leather cracked with age and neglect. His eyes, tired and red, were fixed on the pavement as he walked, the weight of the day's rejection pressing down on him like the weight of the world. For the first time in his life, Aaron felt completely invisible. It was a feeling he wasn't used to, having spent years of his youth fighting in wars, risking his life, earning medals, and being celebrated by his country. But tonight none of that mattered. No one remembered his service. No one cared about his past. No one even cared about the homeless veteran standing before them. A few hours ago, he'd walked into the old diner on Main Street, the one that had always felt like home when he was stationed in the city years ago. His usual spot, a booth by the window, was empty. The waitress had greeted him, a faint smile crossing her lips, though it quickly disappeared when she saw the state of his appearance. He was used to it. His tattered clothes, his unshaven face, the way he looked more like a man who had been left behind than the soldier he once was. When he asked for a cup of coffee, the waitress hesitated. There was a subtle glance between her and the cook in the back. They didn't need to say a word. He'd heard the rumors. He'd seen the looks, the pity, the silent judgment. "Sorry, sir. We're not serving any more customers tonight." Her voice was apologetic but firm. Aaron felt the sting, but he didn't let it show. He turned around, his movements slow, deliberate. The door swung open behind him as the cold night air rushed in, reminding him of the world he no longer belonged to. He stepped outside, into the cold again, and his heart sank. Not a soul was around. The street was quiet, eerily so. His footsteps echoed as he walked away from the diner, heading nowhere in particular, just walking, moving, to push away the sinking feeling inside him. The feeling of irrelevance, the feeling of being forgotten. The memories came uninvited, as they often did during these lonely walks. Aaron had enlisted at 18, eager to serve, eager to prove himself. His father had been a soldier too, a man who wore his service like a badge of honor. Aaron had grown up hearing stories about his father's time in the army, how he'd been decorated for bravery, how he'd led his men through countless battles. Aaron had always admired him, always believed that he would follow in his footsteps and perhaps even outdo him. But life, as it often does, had a way of throwing curveballs. The years in the military had taken their toll. The wars, the losses, the things he'd seen and done, all of it had left a scar deep within him. And when the war ended, when the orders to return home came, Aaron wasn't sure if he was ready. He had hoped that, once he returned to civilian life, things would be different. But they weren't. The world he came back to was different, cold, indifferent, unaware of the sacrifices made by people like him. As Aaron walked through the streets, his thoughts drifted back to the day they let him go. The day he had been told he was no longer needed. The army had used him, like they used so many others, and then discarded him when his usefulness had ended. He'd struggled to adjust, found it hard to fit into a world that no longer had a place for him. He had tried everything, finding work, getting back into a routine, but nothing worked. He had no family, no friends who could truly understand. And now, here he was, homeless, a soldier with nothing left but memories, and the constant, nagging feeling that he had been abandoned. Aaron paused as he reached the corner of 5th Street. A group of teenagers stood huddled around a bonfire in a trash can, laughing and joking, oblivious to the cold. He watched them for a moment, but the sight only deepened the loneliness in his chest. He had once been like them, full of hope, full of dreams. But now, all that was gone. The wind picked up, and he turned away from the fire. He continued walking, the weight of his past pressing heavily on his shoulders. But just as he reached the next intersection, something caught his eye. A man in a suit, standing on the corner, looking directly at him. The man's eyes were dark, calculating. He seemed out of place in the neighborhood, like someone who didn't belong. Aaron's instincts kicked in. He didn't know why, but something about the man made him uneasy. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was no coincidence, that this moment was important somehow. As if sensing his gaze, the man turned slightly, just enough for Aaron to see the glint of a badge, a military insignia. Aaron's heart skipped a beat. The man stepped forward, his face now fully illuminated by the flickering street lamp. His eyes locked onto Aaron's, and for the first time in a long while, Aaron felt a spark of recognition, a connection, a strange pull. "You," the man said, his voice low and urgent. "We need you." Aaron stood frozen, unsure if he'd heard correctly. The man was clearly talking to him, but why? Why now? What could they possibly need him for? A homeless ex-soldier who had been cast aside by the very system that once claimed him as a hero? The man took another step forward, closing the distance between them. "We need you, Aaron Wells," he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. "The country needs you again." Aaron's mind raced. How could that be? What could they possibly want with him? But the man didn't wait for an answer. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded letter, its edges worn, like it had been through 1,000 hands. "You've been summoned," the man said. Aaron's mind raced as the man handed him the folded letter. The city street buzzed quietly around them, but for Aaron, it felt like everything had come to a halt. The man's eyes never left him, unwavering, intense. It was as if Aaron's entire existence hinged on this strange encounter. "Open it," the man urged. Aaron hesitated. The letter felt like a weight in his hands, heavy with unknown meaning. He thought about walking away, about telling the man to leave him alone and continuing on his way. But something deep inside, something long buried, stirred in him. It was a feeling he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. With shaking hands, he unfolded the letter. The words on the page were simple, but they hit him like a punch to the gut. "We need you, Sergeant Wells. A mission awaits you. Come to the address below." The address was in the heart of the city, near the old military base. Aaron knew the place well, had spent years there, training, learning, fighting, but it had been abandoned for years. The military had pulled out long ago, leaving only memories and dust in its wake. What could they possibly need him for there? The man studied him carefully, as if reading his thoughts. "You're not the first to be called back. We've brought others before you, but we need someone with your experience, someone who knows what it means to fight when everything seems lost." Aaron's chest tightened. "Fight for what?" he asked, his voice low and weary. The man's lips twitched into a faint smile. "For something bigger than yourself." Aaron wanted to walk away. He wanted to turn his back on this strange invitation, on whatever mission the man was talking about, but his legs wouldn't move. His body felt rooted to the spot, like it was drawing him in, unwilling to let go. Maybe it was the desperation, the feeling of being forgotten. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the last thread of who he once was. The soldier, the man who lived for something more than survival. "Why me?" he finally asked. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his coat again, pulling out a small photograph. He handed it to Aaron. The photo was old, faded, edges curling, but it was unmistakable. It was Aaron, much younger, standing with a group of soldiers in uniform. They were smiling, posed in front of a military vehicle, as if the world had been full of possibility back then. But what caught Aaron's eye was the man standing next to him in the photo. A man who now looked back at him with a somber gaze from the other side of the photo. It was his old commanding officer, Colonel Grant. Aaron hadn't thought about Grant in years. The man had been like a father to him, a mentor during his service. They had fought together, bled together. But when the war had ended, Aaron lost touch with him. His own life had unraveled, and Colonel Grant had faded into the past. "What's this?" Aaron asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The man's expression grew more serious. "He's gone. But before he passed, he left a message. He asked for you." Aaron's heart skipped a beat. "Gone? What happened?" The man's eyes hardened. "The colonel didn't die in battle, if that's what you're asking. He died in secret, and before he did, he gave orders to find you." A surge of confusion hit Aaron like a wave. His hands trembled as he held the photograph. "What do you mean, secret?" "You're going to find out soon enough," the man replied, his voice grave. "The mission we need you for, it's classified. But trust me when I say this, it's bigger than anything you've faced before, and it's a mission only you can complete." Aaron didn't know what to make of it. Everything inside him screamed to turn and walk away, to forget this bizarre meeting and continue with his empty, lonely life. But deep down, something whispered that this wasn't just a random encounter. This was destiny calling, pulling him back into the fold, back into a life he thought he'd left behind forever. The man stepped back, giving Aaron space. "You have 2 days," he said quietly. "Meet us at the address. Don't be late." And just like that, the man turned and walked into the night, disappearing into the shadows of the city as quickly as he had appeared. Aaron stood alone on the street, the photograph still clutched in his hand. His mind raced with questions, doubts, and the haunting image of Colonel Grant's face. What had happened to him? And why was he being pulled into this unknown mission? He had no answers. But one thing was certain. This was no ordinary night. The universe had just shifted for him, and he was about to be thrust into something much bigger than anything he had ever imagined. The hours passed slowly as Aaron wandered the streets, his mind filled with the image of Colonel Grant and the mysterious mission. The chill of the night air seemed to seep into his bones, but his thoughts were far colder. It wasn't the first time the military had left him behind. After his service ended, Aaron had tried to adjust to civilian life, but it had never quite fit. Every job he tried, every attempt at normalcy, had fallen apart. The veterans' benefits had been a joke, enough to keep him alive, but never enough to give him dignity. It felt like a life spent on the edge of society, never truly a part of it. Aaron's only connection to the life he had once known was his military service. But now, even that seemed distant. The missions, the camaraderie, the pride, it all felt like a dream. And here he was, standing on the precipice, about to be pulled back into a world he had tried so hard to escape. The next day, Aaron packed the little he had left, his worn-out gear, a few personal items, and the photograph. He couldn't explain why, but it felt like the only thing that tied him to his past, to the man who had once mentored him. He didn't know if he was ready to return to the world of soldiers and secrets, but as he stood in front of the abandoned military base later that day, he knew one thing. This was his chance to make something of himself again. To fight for something that wasn't just survival. To fight for honor, for justice, for a mission that would change the course of everything. And so, he walked through the broken gates of the base, feeling both the weight and the promise of the unknown pressing down on him. The abandoned military base loomed ahead, its silhouette barely visible under the dim glow of the setting sun. Aaron stood at the edge of the broken fence, his boots crunching softly against the gravel as he took in the desolate sight. Once, this place had been alive with soldiers, young men and women training, living, laughing, and fighting side by side. It had been a place of purpose, where the world outside didn't matter. but now it was silent, its walls cracked and weathered, like the ghosts of a past that had long since disappeared. Aaron didn't know why he had expected anything different. This place was a shadow of what it once was, much like him. Yet here he stood, the weight of the letter and the mysterious mission pressing down on him, pulling him into a past he thought he had left behind. The man had told him not to be late. The address had led him here, to the heart of the forgotten base, where nothing remained but remnants of a war that had ended years ago. But Aaron didn't see any signs of life. No soldiers, no vehicles, no signs of activity. Only the wind, rustling through broken windows and sending the scent of old machinery into the air. He moved toward the building in front of him, his steps slow but steady. The door was ajar, and the dim light spilling out from within beckoned him inside. The interior was just as forgotten as the outside. Broken desks, cracked windows, and dusty equipment were strewn about haphazardly. The walls were covered in faded murals and military insignia, long since faded from years of neglect. But despite the emptiness, Aaron couldn't shake the feeling that something was different now, that this place, though abandoned, was about to come alive in a way he hadn't expected. He made his way through the maze of rooms, feeling a strange sense of nostalgia. This had been his home once, a place where he had learned, struggled, and sacrificed. It was hard to imagine it had all come to this. As he walked deeper into the building, he heard a soft sound, footsteps echoing in the distance. His instincts kicked in. He knew better than to walk into a potentially dangerous situation without being cautious. He pressed his back against the wall and moved quietly. His senses heightened. He rounded a corner and stopped in his tracks. There, in the center of the room, stood a man, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black tactical suit. The man's face was obscured by the shadows, but his stance, the way he held himself, told Aaron everything he needed to know. This was no ordinary soldier. Aaron stepped forward, but the man's head snapped toward him with lightning speed, his eyes gleaming with recognition. "You came," the man said, his voice low but firm. It wasn't a question. Aaron hesitated, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun that wasn't there. He'd left his sidearm in his apartment. He hadn't expected to find any immediate danger. But now, standing in front of this mysterious figure, he wished he hadn't been so careless. "Who are you?" Aaron asked, his voice steady but wary. The man smiled faintly, but there was no warmth in his eyes. "I'm the one who brought you here. We've been waiting for you. The mission begins." The man motioned for Aaron to follow him, leading him through the dimly lit hallways of the base. They passed rooms filled with old military gear, crates of supplies long untouched, and machinery that had once been the heart of operations here. Finally, they reached a large, secure room at the back of the building. It was filled with screens, maps, and equipment that seemed out of place in the otherwise forgotten space. "Sit," the man ordered, gesturing to a chair in front of a large monitor. Aaron complied, though he had no idea what was going on. His mind was racing with questions about the mission, about Colonel Grant, about the strange man who had brought him here. But there was no time for questions. Not yet. The man sat down beside him and pressed a button on the console. The screen flickered to life, displaying a map of a region in the Middle East, one Aaron knew well. His heart skipped a beat as the image zoomed in on a small village surrounded by mountains, the location marked with a bright red circle. "This is where it begins," the man said. "The mission. The reason we called you back. It's bigger than anything you've faced before." Aaron stared at the screen, his mind trying to process the information. The map, the location, it all seemed so familiar. But why? What did this village have to do with him? The man continued, his voice growing more serious. "There's something happening there. Something that could change the course of history. We need someone who knows the terrain, who understands the stakes, who has the experience to lead." Aaron's breath caught in his throat. "Lead?" He could barely wrap his head around the idea. I'm not a leader anymore. I'm just a man who's been forgotten. The man's expression softened just for a moment. You were never forgotten, Sergeant Wells. The mission is waiting for you. The man paused, his fingers tapping against the table. Your former commander, Colonel Grant. He's not dead. Not really. He's the one who uncovered the secret in that village. But before he could reveal everything, he was silenced. Aaron's pulse quickened. What secret? The man leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. A weapon. A weapon that could end everything we've fought for, and the people who have it, they're coming for you too. Aaron's eyes widened. The man's words sent a chill down his spine. He stood up quickly, his thoughts spiraling. What do I have to do? The man stood as well, his face hardening. You're going back into the field, Wells. It's time to finish what you started. You'll lead a team to that village, and when you find the weapon, you'll make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Aaron sat in the dimly lit room, his fingers still gripping the cold metal of the chair, his mind reeling from the revelation. The words of the mysterious man, the promise of a mission, the mention of Colonel Grant's survival and the secret weapon, still echoed in his ears. His entire life had been turned upside down in a matter of hours. One moment he had been a homeless, forgotten veteran. The next, he was being thrust into a mission that seemed to blur the lines between past and present, duty and survival. The man, still standing in front of the console, didn't wait for Aaron to respond. He pressed a few buttons, and the map on the screen zoomed in on the village, revealing more details. Detailed military outposts, hidden caches, and encrypted messages. It looked like a war zone, not a simple village. But there was something off about it. Something that didn't sit right with Aaron. How long until we're ready to deploy? Aaron asked, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. Soon, the man replied, still absorbed in the screen. We've already gathered a team. We'll move quickly. The longer we wait, the more dangerous it becomes. But there's something you need to understand. You're not just going in to secure the weapon. You're going in to stop a larger conspiracy. This isn't just about a secret weapon. It's about what they plan to do with it. Aaron felt his stomach tighten. Who are they? Who's behind this? The man turned to face him, his expression cold and hard. A group of rogue operatives. They've infiltrated our military. They've already begun to move the weapon. We need to get to it first. We need to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. The next morning, Aaron was briefed on the team he would be working with. The man, who introduced himself simply as Agent Carter, had gathered a mix of soldiers and operatives from various units. They were waiting for him at a nearby safe house, ready to be deployed. Aaron's instincts were sharp, but even he couldn't help but feel a pang of doubt as he prepared to lead them. The safe house was just as abandoned as the base, a rundown building tucked away in an industrial area on the edge of town. It looked like something out of a bad spy movie, decaying walls, flickering lights, and an air of secrecy that hung in the silence. Inside, a group of soldiers stood in a tight circle, speaking in low voices. They turned as Aaron entered the room, their faces a mix of curiosity and respect. Aaron didn't know any of them, but he could tell they were battle-hardened, trained to face danger without hesitation. That made him feel a little better. Sergeant Wells, one of the soldiers greeted him, offering a nod. I've heard about you. It's an honor to serve under you. Aaron didn't respond right away. The weight of leadership was heavy, especially when he hadn't led anyone in years. He knew he had to push past his doubts. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about the mission. He looked at the team, noting the different faces, young and old, men and women, all of them waiting for him to take the lead. He had been thrust into this role, but now it was up to him to make it count. Agent Carter stood at the front of the room, a large map pinned to the wall behind him. He gestured to the village marked on the map. Our objective is simple, Carter said, his voice calm but firm. Get in, secure the weapon, and get out. We'll take the most direct route, no detours. But don't get complacent. The enemy has already moved in. We can expect resistance, and we need to be prepared for anything. Aaron studied the map, his eyes tracing the path they would take. It was a winding route through dense terrain, mountains, valleys, and small villages, the perfect location for an ambush. He could almost feel the danger in the air, like it was already waiting for them. "We'll split into 2 teams," Carter continued, pointing to the marked locations. "Team Alpha will make the first push, securing the perimeter. Team Bravo, you'll follow up with Aaron. Your mission is to take control of the building and find the weapon. The rest of you, be ready to handle anything that comes up." Aaron nodded. This wasn't just a military mission anymore. This was a race against time, a fight to keep the world from descending into chaos. "We'll move out in 2 hours," Carter concluded. "Get ready, gear up." As Aaron gathered his equipment, his mind wandered back to his time in the field. The early days of his service had been full of hope. He had joined the military to follow in his father's footsteps, to make something of himself. He had believed in the cause, believed that his actions would make the world a better place. But the war had changed him. The blood, the death, the faces of the men he had lost, it all weighed on him. And when it was over, he found himself adrift. No one knew how to deal with soldiers like him, men who had seen too much, who had done too much. He had tried to bury those memories, to move on, but they kept coming back. Now, as he fastened his gear and checked his weapon, the weight of those memories hit him again. But this time, he wasn't just carrying them. This time, he was carrying the responsibility of a mission bigger than himself. 2 hours later, Aaron and his team were in position, ready to move out. The sky had darkened, and the air was thick with tension. Every step felt calculated, every sound amplified by the silence of the night. Aaron led the way, his eyes scanning the surroundings as they made their way through the abandoned streets. They were about to enter enemy territory. His heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was focused. The team followed close behind, their movements synchronized, their breaths shallow as they approached the border of the village. "Stay sharp," Aaron muttered under his breath, more to himself than anyone else. As they crossed the threshold, the sound of distant gunfire echoed through the air, a harsh reminder that this mission was anything but simple. It wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight to keep the world from falling apart. A sudden explosion shook the ground beneath their feet, throwing Aaron to the ground. His ears rang, his vision blurred, but instinct kicked in. He scrambled to his feet, drawing his weapon as the team scattered for cover. The enemy had found them, but there was something else. Something strange about the attack. The force was too precise, too coordinated. It wasn't just a random ambush. They were being targeted, and someone knew exactly where they were. Aaron's breath caught in his throat as he looked around. And then, in the distance, he saw it. A shadow, moving quickly, silently. It was too fast to be a soldier, too methodical. The enemy wasn't just here, they were watching, and Aaron Wells was their next target. The explosion had left Aaron's heart pounding in his chest, but there was no time to think about it. Instinct kicked in. He dropped to the ground, pressing his back against the crumbling wall of the nearest building. His hand trembled as he gripped his weapon, but he didn't let the fear overtake him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was a mission to stop a conspiracy that threatened everything. "Alpha Team, report!" Aaron barked into his comms, his voice low but sharp. The static buzzed briefly before a crackling voice came through. "We're all good, Sergeant. We've taken cover," came the reply. "But we've got movement ahead. Looks like we're surrounded." Aaron cursed under his breath. The ambush hadn't been a coincidence. Someone knew exactly where they were, and they were ready for it. He looked around at his team. Their faces were hard, their expressions focused, but Aaron could see the doubt creeping in. This wasn't just another firefight. This was something far worse. They were walking into the unknown, and the only thing that seemed certain was that they were being hunted. "We can't stay here," Aaron said, his voice low but commanding. "We need to move, now." The sound of boots on gravel echoed in the distance, growing louder by the second. The enemy was closing in, and Aaron knew they couldn't wait much longer. He motioned for the team to follow him, signaling them to move quickly and quietly. They couldn't risk making noise. They needed to slip past the enemy and get to the building where the weapon was rumored to be hidden. But as they moved through the narrow alleyways, the weight of the mission felt heavier with every step. The village was eerily quiet now, the sounds of gunfire and explosions having faded into the distance. It was like the calm before the storm. Aaron's mind raced. Where was the weapon? And why was it so important? If it was just another piece of military hardware, why had Colonel Grant gone to such lengths to uncover it? The answers felt just out of reach, and the deeper they went into the village, the more Aaron realized that this wasn't just about a weapon. This was about a deeper conspiracy, one that could destroy everything they'd fought for. As they reached the edge of the village, the faint sound of footsteps reached Aaron's ears. He froze, motioning for the team to stop. "They're close," Aaron whispered, his hand hovering over the handle of his weapon. He squinted into the darkness ahead. There was a faint outline of a figure moving quickly through the shadows, too quick to be an ordinary soldier. Whoever it was, they knew exactly what they were doing. "Get ready," Aaron murmured. "We're going in. Stay sharp." As they approached the building where the weapon was believed to be hidden, Aaron's senses were on high alert. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional rustling of leaves and the distant hum of the wind. They reached the entrance, and Aaron signaled for the team to fan out. "Alpha Team, you're with me. Bravo Team, cover the rear," Aaron instructed, his voice barely above a whisper. The door was old, its wood splintered and cracked, but it still held. Aaron pushed it open slowly, carefully, until there was just enough space to slip inside. The interior was dark, the air thick with dust. It was an abandoned warehouse, once a hub for military supplies, now little more than a decaying shell of its former self. But despite the decay, there was a sense of urgency in the air. The walls felt alive with secrets, and Aaron could almost hear the echoes of the past reverberating through the empty space. "Move in," Aaron whispered, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at the back of his mind. They moved cautiously through the warehouse, their footsteps muffled by the dust beneath them. Aaron scanned the room, his eyes darting from corner to corner, but there was no sign of the weapon, no sign of anything. But then, in the far corner of the room, something caught his eye. A large crate, sitting alone in the shadows. It wasn't marked, but the way it sat there, out of place, untouched, told Aaron everything he needed to know. "That's it," he said quietly, nodding toward the crate. "Check it out." Aaron approached the crate with caution. He crouched down and slid his hand over the cold metal, feeling the shape beneath the dust. His heart raced. This was it. The weapon they had been searching for. He motioned for Bravo Team to help him move the crate. The moment they touched it, the sound of the metal scraping against the floor seemed too loud in the silence. But when they finally opened the crate, what they found was even more unexpected than Aaron could have imagined. Inside the crate was a set of sleek, futuristic devices, technological tools that looked like something out of a science fiction movie. There were no guns, no bombs. Instead, there were small, compact machines, each one humming quietly as if it were alive. "What the hell is this?" Aaron muttered, his eyes wide. Agent Carter's voice crackled in his earpiece. "That's the weapon. But it's not what you think. These aren't just machines. They're a new form of warfare. They can manipulate any system, communication, defense, infrastructure. They can bring entire nations to their knees." Aaron felt a chill run down his spine. The implications were too great, too terrifying. This wasn't just a weapon. It was an unstoppable force. And now, it was in their hands. As Aaron stood there, staring at the devices, a loud crash echoed from behind them. The doors to the warehouse flew open, and soldiers stormed in, their weapons raised, their eyes focused on Aaron and his team. They had been set up. The enemy had found them. But there was something strange about the soldiers who entered. Their movements were too precise, too practiced, as if they were part of something bigger, something far more dangerous than a simple military operation. A voice from the shadows called out, cutting through the chaos. "Give us the weapons, Sergeant. You don't know what you're dealing with." Aaron's heart raced as he looked around. The mission had just taken a dangerous turn, and they were now caught in a fight that could change everything. The sound of boots slamming against the concrete floor echoed in the warehouse as Aaron's team scrambled into position. The soldiers who had burst through the door were no ordinary enemy. They were organized, precise, and well-equipped. Their uniforms didn't match any military faction Aaron had seen before. They moved like a well-oiled machine, sweeping the room with practiced efficiency. Aaron's pulse hammered in his chest. He had led his team into this warehouse with a single objective: to secure the weapon. But now, it felt like they were the ones being hunted. "Take cover!" Aaron shouted, grabbing one of his team members and pulling him to the side just as a bullet whizzed by, narrowly missing them. They dove behind a stack of old crates, their hearts racing as gunfire filled the air. The warehouse was alive with the sound of chaos. His team was already returning fire, but Aaron knew this wasn't a fight they could win. Not like this. They were outnumbered and outgunned, and worse, the enemy wasn't just after them, they were after the weapon. "We need to get out of here!" Aaron yelled, trying to make himself heard over the gunfire. But even as he spoke, the heavy footsteps of more soldiers echoed from the doorway. The enemy was closing in from all sides. The walls of the warehouse felt like they were closing in around them. "Alpha team, fall back!" Aaron barked. "We're moving out. Bravo, cover the rear!" He didn't wait to see if they heard. Aaron grabbed the weapon crate, pushing it toward the exit. His muscles screamed in protest, but he didn't care. This mission had already gone beyond a simple retrieval. It had become a fight for survival, and he wasn't about to lose. As they sprinted toward the back door, Aaron could hear the sound of footsteps behind them, too close for comfort. He risked a glance over his shoulder, his heart sinking as he saw the enemy soldiers closing in. They were fast, and they knew the terrain. "Faster!" Aaron shouted, adrenaline surging through his veins. But as they neared the exit, an explosion rocked the building, sending them all stumbling to the ground. The shockwave hit like a freight train, knocking the wind out of Aaron and throwing the weapon crate from his grasp. The warehouse around them shook, dust falling from the rafters in a thick cloud. Aaron pushed himself up, gasping for breath, his vision swimming. The dust in the air made it hard to see, but he could still hear the soldiers moving, hear the crackle of their voices as they closed in. "Move! Move!" Aaron shouted, grabbing the crate again and pushing forward. The team scrambled to their feet, weapons raised, but they were trapped. There was no way out. The explosion had sealed the exit. They were in enemy territory, and they were being cornered. The soldiers were getting closer now, and Aaron knew they had only minutes, if that, to escape. But as the enemy soldiers rounded the corner, something unexpected happened. A loud, piercing voice echoed across the room. "Stand down." Aaron froze. He recognized the voice. It was Agent Carter. But how? He had been with them in the safe house earlier. Aaron's eyes darted to the side as Carter stepped into view, his hands raised in surrender. Behind him, the enemy soldiers halted, their weapons lowering slightly. Aaron's heart raced. Something wasn't right. "Carter, what the hell is going on?" Aaron demanded, his voice low but urgent. "What are you doing here?" Carter's face was grim. "I didn't want it to be like this, Wells. But you've stumbled into something much bigger than you realize." The enemy soldiers, still tense but awaiting orders, looked to Carter for guidance. He looked at them, then back at Aaron, his expression filled with regret. "Colonel Grant, he didn't send you here," Carter continued. "I did." Aaron's heart skipped a beat. "What? What are you talking about?" Carter looked away, his jaw tightening. "I'm part of the organization that's been tracking the weapon. We've been keeping it hidden, but it's time for it to be used. The conspiracy goes deeper than you know. Colonel Grant, he was part of our plan. We were going to use him to find the weapon. But when he got too close, he started asking too many questions. Aaron felt the ground shift beneath him. He had trusted Carter. He had believed in this mission. But now, it seemed everything had been a lie. "You used me," Aaron said, his voice cold with realization. "You used all of us." Carter nodded slowly. "Yes, but I didn't want it to end like this. The weapon is too dangerous. If it falls into the wrong hands, there's no telling what it will do. We were trying to prevent that." But before Aaron could respond, the ground shook again, this time more violently than before. The warehouse's walls cracked, and debris fell from above. The sound of rumbling engines filled the air. A large military-grade truck barreled through the back wall of the warehouse, smashing the debris aside. The soldiers moved into position, surrounding Aaron and his team. Aaron's hand instinctively went to the weapon crate, but before he could make a move, Carter raised his hand. "Get in," he said, his voice urgent. "We don't have much time." Aaron hesitated, torn between his anger and his sense of duty. The truth was, they were running out of options. The weapon, the conspiracy, everything. It was all coming to a head. With a deep breath, Aaron nodded. "Let's go." The team moved toward the truck, the weight of the situation bearing down on them. But as they climbed into the back of the vehicle, Aaron knew that this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. And whatever came next, they would have to face it together. The truck roared to life as the team climbed into the back, its engine drowning out everything else. The walls of the warehouse receded in the rearview mirror, and with them, the weight of the lies that had been uncovered. But Aaron's mind was far from calm. The truth, delivered by Carter, echoed in his mind. The conspiracy wasn't just about the weapon, it was about power, control, and the manipulations that had been at play from the very beginning. They rode in silence for what felt like hours, the vehicle bouncing over rough roads. The landscape outside blurred, a patchwork of decaying buildings and empty fields stretching toward the horizon. The world felt distant, like they were headed into a future they couldn't control. And still, Aaron couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into a trap. Carter sat at the front of the truck, his face hidden in shadow, his hands gripping the steering wheel with a white-knuckled intensity. His eyes were focused, but Aaron could see the tension in his jaw. Carter wasn't at peace with what had happened, at least not entirely. But then again, neither was Aaron. As the truck continued down the deserted road, Aaron glanced over at his team. They were tired, their faces drawn with exhaustion and confusion. But there was something else there too, an unspoken understanding. They knew this wasn't just a mission anymore. This was a fight for their lives. And now, they were depending on Carter, a man whose allegiance had been in question from the start. "Where are we headed?" Aaron finally asked, breaking the silence. Carter's gaze flickered briefly to the rearview mirror before returning to the road. "To the extraction point. We need to rendezvous with a higher command." Aaron's stomach twisted. Higher command. He had no idea what Carter meant by that, but it didn't sound good. "We're not done yet," Carter said, his voice hard, almost robotic. "The weapon is only the beginning. There's more at play here than just a simple military operation. This goes beyond national security. This is about control." Aaron's fists clenched, the weight of Carter's words settling like a heavy fog over him. "Who's in charge of all this, Carter?" Carter remained silent for a long moment, as if weighing whether to answer. "I don't know," he finally admitted. "But we're going to find out." The truck finally pulled into a small, nondescript building on the outskirts of a rural town. It was barely visible from the main road, its walls blending into the surrounding landscape. But there was something about it that made Aaron uneasy, an invisible presence, like they were being watched. "Stay close," Carter ordered as he jumped out of the truck. "We've got a secure meeting here. No one goes off on their own." The team followed Carter into the building, a cold, dimly lit space with metal tables and chairs scattered around. The air was thick with tension. There was no sign of the higher command Carter had mentioned, no obvious clue as to who they were meeting. Aaron's nerves were on edge, his instincts screaming that they were walking into another trap. But as they settled into the room, the door at the far end opened. A figure emerged, tall and imposing, dressed in a dark suit. His face was covered by the shadow of a hood, but the cold steel of his gaze pierced through Aaron like a knife. Carter stepped forward, his posture stiff, like a man acknowledging something dangerous. "We've brought him, the one who can get us the weapon." The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, his cold gaze swept over Aaron, taking in the disheveled veteran, the weight of the mission evident in his eyes. "I know who you are," the man said, his voice calm, even. "I know what you've done, Sergeant Wells." Aaron stiffened, a chill running down his spine. "And who the hell are you?" The man chuckled darkly. "Does it really matter? I'm the one who's been pulling the strings, the one you've been chasing." Aaron's breath caught in his throat. "You? You're the one behind all of this?" The man nodded, his face still obscured. "Yes, I'm the one who orchestrated it all. The weapon, the mission, the trap. And now, you're going to help me finish it." Aaron's mind raced. This wasn't just a rogue operation. This man, whoever he was, had been behind everything from the very start. The mission, the deception, the lies. "Why me?" Aaron demanded, his voice thick with anger. "Why pull me into this?" The man's lips curled into a sinister smile. "You're more useful to me alive, Wells. The weapon needs to be activated, and you're the only one who can do it." The words hit Aaron like a punch to the gut. He had been a pawn in a game he hadn't even known he was playing. "What do you want from me?" Aaron growled. The man's smile faded, replaced by something darker. "I want you to help me unlock the weapon. It's embedded with a failsafe, a system that can only be accessed by someone who has seen combat, someone who has the right kind of experience. You fit the profile." Aaron stepped forward, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. The weight of the gun at his side was the only thing grounding him in this moment. "You've been using me this whole time," Aaron said, his voice low but filled with venom. "You used Colonel Grant. You used my team. And now you want me to be your tool?" The man's expression didn't change. "You were never more than a means to an end, Wells. But now you're in too deep to back out. We both know it." Aaron's heart pounded in his chest. He was stuck. There was no way out. And the more he heard, the more the world he thought he knew slipped further away. But just as Aaron moved to confront the man, a loud noise, an explosion far in the distance, shook the building. The walls trembled, and the sound of shouting filled the air. The man's eyes flashed with alarm. "They've found us," he hissed. "We need to move, now." Before Aaron could react, the door burst open, and soldiers poured in, this time not from the enemy, but from within the building itself. It was clear now. This was a trap, and they had walked right into it. In the chaos, Aaron's mind raced. The weapon, the conspiracy, the man in the suit. It was all coming together, but in the worst way possible. The room erupted into chaos, and Aaron knew. There was no going back now. The room exploded into chaos as soldiers flooded the safe house, their weapons raised and eyes cold with intent. Aaron's instincts kicked in immediately, his body moving before his mind could process what was happening. He dove to the side, knocking over a table for cover as gunfire erupted all around him. The team scrambled, returning fire. But they were outnumbered and surrounded. The man in the suit, who had orchestrated everything, stood frozen for a moment, shock registering on his face. This was no part of the plan. He hadn't expected them to be found so quickly. Aaron's heart raced as he scanned the room, looking for an escape route. But the building was surrounded, and there was no way out without drawing fire. He could feel the weight of the weapon crate in his hands, but now it was a liability. They needed to run. "Carter!" Aaron shouted, his voice sharp and urgent. "We need to move! Now!" Carter, who had been crouched behind cover, looked up, his face hard. "Get to the back exit! I'll cover you!" Without waiting for another word, Aaron motioned for his team to follow. They darted toward the back of the building, bullets zipping by them, some striking the walls, others hitting the crates and tables. The sounds of gunfire, shouts, and chaos blurred into one deafening roar. As they reached the back door, Carter joined them, still firing at the advancing soldiers. "Go!" he yelled, shoving Aaron toward the exit. Aaron didn't hesitate. He pushed through the door and into the alley behind the safe house, his team following closely behind. The alley was narrow, and they couldn't risk stopping for long. "We're almost there," Aaron said, his voice strained but determined. Just as they turned a corner, a vehicle screeched to a halt in front of them. It was the truck they had used earlier, the same truck that had brought them here. Without thinking, Aaron rushed forward, throwing the weapon crate into the back of the truck as the team climbed in. But before they could drive off, the building they had just escaped from exploded. The blast shook the ground beneath them, and debris rained down from the sky. Aaron watched as the safe house disintegrated in a fiery explosion, a stark reminder of how high the stakes had become. "Go, go!" Aaron barked at the driver, who gunned the engine, sending the truck speeding down the road. But even as they raced towards safety, Aaron knew the truth. This was just the beginning. They hadn't escaped danger. They had only moved the battlefield. The truck rumbled through the night, its tires skimming over the uneven road. Inside, the team was silent, their faces illuminated by the flickering lights of the dashboard. Everyone was exhausted, both physically and mentally. But the mission was far from over. Aaron sat in the front with Carter, his mind racing. The truth was beginning to settle in. He had been used, manipulated, betrayed by the very people he had trusted. Colonel Grant, Carter, even the team he had fought beside, they were all part of a game, a larger plan that he didn't fully understand. But there was one thing Aaron knew for sure. The weapon couldn't fall into the wrong hands. They reached a secluded location deep in the countryside, far from prying eyes. The truck skidded to a stop, and the team piled out. The air was thick with tension. There was nowhere to run now. They had come too far, and now they were cornered. "This is it," Aaron said, his voice low but filled with conviction. "No more running." They were at the entrance of a secure underground facility, the final location where the weapon was to be activated. But this place, this cold, dark bunker, held more than just the weapon. It was the heart of the conspiracy. Carter, who had been silent for most of the ride, finally spoke. "You don't understand, Wells. The world isn't ready for the weapon. But it's going to be activated anyway. It's too powerful to just leave lying around. It's a new era. And those who control it will control everything." Aaron stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "You're wrong. This weapon was never meant to control. It was meant to protect." Carter smirked. "And what do you plan to do about it?" Without a second thought, Aaron raised his weapon. "Stop you." But before he could fire, the ground beneath them shook. The bunker doors opened, and out stepped a group of heavily armed soldiers, led by none other than the man in the suit, the one who had been pulling the strings all along. "So you've come," the man said, his voice a low growl. "I hoped it wouldn't come to this, but it seems you've made your choice." Aaron's blood boiled. The man had orchestrated it all, the betrayal, the lies, the mission. And now he was here, standing in front of them, prepared to finish what he started. "You don't have to do this," Aaron said, his voice steady but filled with anger. "We can end this right now." The man smiled, his eyes cold and calculating. "You have no idea what you're up against, Wells. You were never meant to stop this. You were never meant to win." Just as the tension reached its peak, a loud crack filled the air. A shot rang out, and the man in the suit stumbled back, his face contorted in pain. Behind him a shadow emerged from the darkness, a figure wearing a familiar uniform. It was Colonel Grant. But the colonel was different. His eyes were cold, focused, and there was no sign of the man Aaron had once known. Grant looked at him, his expression unreadable. "I'm sorry, Sergeant," Grant said, his voice hoarse but resolute. "But this has to end." The room fell silent as the two men locked eyes. The final battle was about to begin. The world felt like it was crashing down around Aaron as he stared at Colonel Grant. The man he had once admired, trusted, was now standing in front of him, a stranger with the weight of the world on his shoulders. Grant looked at him, his face grim. "You're too late, Wells. The weapon's already activated. You can't stop it." Aaron's heart sank. "What do you mean? What have you done?" Grant stepped forward, his eyes cold. "I've done what needed to be done. The weapon isn't just a tool, it's a force, and it's going to change everything. You think you can stop it? You think you can control it?" Aaron didn't know what to say. He had been so focused on stopping the weapon, on saving the world from its power, that he hadn't considered the possibility that it had already been set in motion, that the war for control had already begun. But even now, with everything at stake, he couldn't give up. He couldn't let the weapon fall into the wrong hands, no matter who stood in his way. "Grant," Aaron said, his voice steady, "you don't have to do this. We can stop this together. We can make it right." But Grant's eyes only hardened. "You don't get it, do you, Wells? This isn't about making things right. This is about survival. The world is changing, and I'm the one who's going to make sure we survive." Aaron didn't hesitate. He raised his weapon, pointing it directly at Grant. "I'm sorry," Aaron whispered, his finger tightening on the trigger. "But this ends now." The shot rang out, and the world fell silent.